a lot of things you can say about him, and one of the problems is he always says, make it short, don't say anything, but I do want to recognize, the work he did as General Counsel for MALDEF, the Mexican and American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That was an important part of his career. He worked for Paul Simon at one point as the General Counsel and the Staff Director for the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. He's been appointed by President Clinton as a Special Counsel for Immigration-related unfair employment practices. He's really brought to life the whole initiative around affirmatively furthering fair housing, finally rising to the ranks of being something that's really important in HUD, and we really need to thank him for that. And most importantly, or equally important, is the fact that John Trasvina runs a department that funds many of our efforts as FIPS and FAPS to be able to help further fair housing, fair lending in communities, and without the support of HUD and specifically FHEO, we would have a lot less resources and tools to work with, and we're very, very appreciative of that, John. So please join me in welcoming his returning engagement, the Assistant Secretary for FHEO, John Trasvina.
Thank you, John, for the kind introduction. Yes, it is a pleasure to be back here with you this evening. And I know it's a Friday night. I know you're not looking forward to a long speech or long speeches by anybody. Mayor Gray wants you to get out and enjoy the town and spend some money. But I do want to share with you a few thoughts and words and really congratulate all of you for another successful conference. And John, I know you got my city wrong, but I know you come from Boston, right? I think I noticed a slight accent there. But also, I see a big smile on John's face. It's the end of another successful NCRC conference, and it's springtime, so that means the Bruins, the Celtics, beginning of the Red Sox, and, wouldn't you know it, Harvard Crimson 68, University of New Mexico 62. So that's March Madness for you. I'm especially pleased to be back on stage with Julianne Melvo, Dr. Melvo. And those of you who were here last year remember in our first appearance together that I recounted the fact that about 44 years ago, Julianne's father, Paul Melvo, and my mom, Carmen Trasvina, they were classmates at the University of San Francisco getting their master's degrees in education. There was a Ford-funded program to train minority administrators. So during the day, they were in some of the schools in San Francisco, some of the toughest schools. But schools that didn't have a whole lot of role models, didn't have minority professionals. And then they were getting their master's degree in the evening, and then they were trailblazers. Trailblazers in a time where there was a lot of change, and very few men and women of color ahead of them. And that changed. San Francisco was, just like Boston, a cauldron of change. We didn't have in elective office someone like Louise A. Hicks. But I recall vividly, when I attended a school board meeting, there were three men standing nearby. They took off their overcoats and they were displaying their khaki uniforms and their Nazi armbands. Yes, even in that idyllic city by the bay, we had racism and we had resistance. So people like Mr. Paul Melvo and my mom were there, courageous, dedicated to the kids, dedicated to the community. So all of us in this room have people who come before us, who stood up then and continue to stand out for us today. We were fortunate to be able to stand on their shoulders as we tackled the demons of discrimination that remain in the 21st century. This is a night, of course, to celebrate some victories and some outstanding community leaders and organizations. We have many notable award winners tonight, and we celebrate them all. But one in particular, I want to recognize the good people of the California Coalition for Rural Housing. who will be the recipients of the, I hope I'm not telling you anything too early. No. Okay, good. The recipient of the Representative James Leach Award. Jim Leach, of course, served many years on the House Banking Committee and currently serves the Obama administration as chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. California Coalition for Rural Housing, along with members of the California Reinvestment Coalition, came by my office yesterday, and they spoke, and Sonia Avery in particular was excellent in bringing us back to the people and the communities and the need for meaningful partnerships. Here in Washington, it is very easy to fall into the trap of thinking you're relevant to the real world just because you're connected by the internet or you get reports on field conditions. Too often the reports and the numbers on the page mask the real pain that America's families have faced and the real hard work and the real hope that groups like the California Coalition for Rural Housing provide daily. Behind every number, every statistic is a family and our future. So Sonia, Robert, and the men and women of the coalition, they never forget that, and they never let us in Washington, D.C. forget that. So to them and to all the award winners, as well as everyone in this room, I say thank you. So let's give them a round of applause. Year in and year out, NCRC is one of HUD's strongest partners and messengers of our vision. We appreciate all that you are doing to promote equal access to banking services. Your commitment, working side by side with HUD to create inclusive, sustainable communities and increase housing opportunities for all, takes us to places we might not otherwise reach and connects us with people we might not otherwise serve. NCRC has been with us since 1994, and that's been about 20 years, but today the partnership, I believe, is at its strongest. As many of you know, NCRC conducts training regarding fair housing planning to support fair housing choices. This training is supported by a $500,000 FIP grant from us and is part of a national initiative to support increased discussion and engagement in an effort to strengthen analyses of impediments to fair housing choice that are required around the country. It is just one of many grants that we entrust at NCRC to do work on identifying housing discrimination, conducting fair housing tester training, establishing a new group in South Carolina, just to name a few. NCRC is the only organization selected to develop this national initiative. It's a project that provides a venue to increase discussions and encourage positive actions to address long-standing issues of segregation, suggest important ways in which to advance communities of color, recognizing the role that lending disinvestment has played in shaping our neighborhoods, support increased access to fair housing opportunities and choices, and create positive fair housing environments. Simply stated, if jurisdictions aren't getting fair housing in their analysis of impediments right, then everything that flows from that analysis is off on the wrong track. We will work with those jurisdictions to get it right, and we'll work with them again and provide them technical assistance to get it right. The cities and towns and counties and housing authorities that receive HUD funding are our communities, and they are our partners across the country. But even they get it wrong, and we are true to our values and to the people whose courage and dedication made it possible for the Fair Housing Act to be enacted in 1968, when we enforced the law vigorously and fairly. 2 weeks ago, 3 highly respected civil rights organizations, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, the National Fair Housing Alliance, and the Poverty and Research Action Council, jointly issued a report crediting HUD with making significant advancements to enforce the Fair Housing Act's requirement that HUD funding recipients and HUD itself affirmatively further fair housing. Individually and collectively, and of course standing along with NCRC, these organizations have the institutional memory of how things were, of how things are, and how they should be. So it was gratifying for my staff of 580 around the nation in 43 cities to be able to read the group's appreciation and understanding of our efforts and direction. For us and for you, it means getting the analysis of impediments to fair housing from the jurisdiction, reviewing them, determining whether they have a complete picture of whether their local zoning laws and other ordinances advance or impede fair housing, whether they are confronting and combating segregation where it exists, whether community groups are at the table when decisions are formulated, whether the increasing populations of limited English proficient people are included, whether there is true access for people with disabilities, and the myriad other considerations that we train jurisdictions to examine and take up as they assess fair housing at home. So we're doing more, finding many places who do it right and finding many who need our help to do it right. You all know about Westchester County, New York. Since last we met, the Justice Department, on behalf of HUD, has gone back to the district court to insist that the county do what it said it would do in the 2009 consent decree, promote source of income legislation and hold municipalities accountable when their laws stand in the way of fair housing. The county has produced AIs since 2009. They've produced about 5 of them, and we have sent back each one of them, and we've withheld HUD funds. Now that's not our goal, but it is necessary. The goal is that jurisdictions use the resources of HUD to advance fair housing. We will help them, but we will stay the course until they get it right. Our work throughout the country touches lives and families and is at the core of progress for equal educational opportunity, improved health outcomes, and better and stronger neighborhoods and communities. Now, you heard my boss, Secretary Donovan, earlier at your conference about all the things HUD does to create better housing in communities. That job is not complete unless we are creating fair housing in communities. A moment ago, I mentioned the Justice Department. I would be remiss if I were not to mention my friend, Tom Pettis, our outstanding Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. We could not have a stronger Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights than Tom, not just on issues related to housing and land use discrimination, but on all the issues that have come before him. To all of us, he is a chief civil rights law enforcer. In addition to me, he is a trusted partner and a longtime friend. I can't think of anyone better to carry on the committed work of Hilda Solis and the men and women of the Department of Labor than Tom Pettis. Now, one of our shared victories this past 12 months has been the new disparate impact rule. And I thank David Berenbaum, especially, for his stamina in what has been a long and sometimes wild ride. Now, it's not particularly new. For more than 30 years, disparate impact analyses have been an important way to examine institutional practices and policies for their decidedly discriminatory effects, whether there was sufficient evidence to prove intent or not. Recognized by all of the federal courts of appeal that have considered the issue, disparate impact has been part of HUD's investigative analytics for at least 25 years. You've brought cases over the years, as has the federal government. Now we have a nationally uniform set of rules for industry courts and litigators to follow. The rule went into effect last Friday. Having the rule in place makes clear that we will use every enforcement resource available to continue and ultimately end the fight against housing discrimination and carry out the federal promise enacted 45 years ago next month. Earlier, I made reference to the National Civil Rights Organization's recognition of my staff's good works. Well, they also called us out for being slow on some things like the affirmatively furthering fair housing regulation. We take the credit for the good stuff and we take the responsibility for the not so good stuff. Affirmatively furthering continues to be a top priority for Secretary Donovan, this administration, and all of HUD. We are ever close on that regulation, but of course we are not waiting for a new regulation to fulfill those responsibilities we have under current law. Led by my Deputy Assistant Secretary for Enforcement, the tireless Sarah Pratt, with you, we are advancing AFFH like never before and ferreting out either violations or opportunities to change in small towns, big cities, and states across the nation. Now, I want to be respectful of the hour and your growing appetites, but I am immensely proud of the work our team is doing around the country. Some of our notable successes have been coming from the New England area. It's no small part because of our newly appointed, since the last time I was here, regional director, Susan forward. Thank you. So we're breaking new ground against lending practices that single out pregnant women seeking home loans or refinancing who are told to go back to work early to be considered for a loan they and their families otherwise qualify for. We're breaking new ground carrying out the HUD Equal Access to Housing rule to ensure that HUD housing and HUD programs are open to all, irrespective of gender identity, sexual orientation, or marital status. We will not subsidize discrimination. And we are working to ensure that the Fair Housing Act applies to student campus housing in colleges and universities across the country, and that people with disabilities are not asked by banks for unnecessary and intrusive medical information beyond what prospective lenders need to review a loan application. And finally, while HUD is not the lead agency in this regard, we can play and we will continue to play an important role as the Obama administration advances comprehensive immigration reform. Comprehensive immigration reform will bring out from the shadows of exploitation many people who already live amongst us. An essential part of affirmatively furthering fair housing is integrating these and other newcomers into the larger communities in our society. We want to help communities succeed in doing so. So while mayors and city councils have no role in deciding who enters the country or who becomes a citizen, they can have welcoming and inclusionary policies, such as Welcome Dayton in Ohio, or the work done in Indianapolis that has produced some of the highest rates of naturalization anywhere. We want to support that work as we examine AIs for the degree to which immigrant integration issues are addressed and newcomers and organizations are at the table. And we have fair housing enforcement actions in states where immigrants live today, such as Virginia, Tennessee, and Alabama, and reach outcomes that are win-win situations. You will see more and hear more about this in the coming months. As we truly become the fair housing enforcers on 21st century issues, we are also equipped with 21st century technology. Last month, we became the first federal civil rights agency with an app that when you download it from the Apple Store under housing discrimination, and will be on Android soon, you will have fair housing rights and responsibilities and the complaint form available to be filed and submitted. We are working with allies across the nation so that anytime you as a community leader are approached by someone in need, you will have instant access to our help. If you haven't downloaded it yet, I encourage you to do so. So my guess by now is you've downloaded enough information for me for the evening. I am grateful for your work and your dedication to people across this land. Through your efforts, you make us a better nation, true to our values. So since I started this speech by referencing John's Boston roots, let me close by echoing the words of another great son of Massachusetts, President John F. Kennedy, who stated in his inaugural address, "Let us go forth to lead the land we love, knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." Thank you all for everything that you do.